I've come across a meme that's attributed to Ron Paul. Now, because it's a meme, I decided to do a bit more searching, and it turns out this seems to be quite plausible because Ron Paul has taken this position regarding the airstrike on Syria by the Trump administration. So, this is a quote. Does anyone believe that on the eve of peace talks, just after the White House said the Syrian people should choose their own leaders, that Assad would launch a gas attack to turn the whole world against him? We're back to the same lies that got us into Iraq. Do we never learn to question the propaganda? This is from Ron Paul. Now, not surprisingly, Russia Today and Press TV are lapping up things like this. They are really endorsing the views of those in the United States who question President Trump's actions here in terms of the airstrike. But Russia Today, in particular, has a very long track record of doing that. They're on overdrive to try and push their ideological case because Russia Today is not an independent source. As far as I'm concerned, it's a wing of the Russian government. Um, so they will find any sort of dissenters, anyone with a different point of view from the sitting American position or European position or any Western position. RT is not balanced. They will not interview anyone from the Trump administration. They will not interview anyone who agrees with President Trump. They will only interview people who disagree with him or whatever position they're criticizing. If you look closely at RT, they always will interview only people who share their worldview. Now that says a lot as far as I'm concerned. Contrast that with the BBC, which has many faults, but the BBC at least interviewed a Syrian government spokesman. Now the BBC man may not agree with the opinions, and it got testy as it should, given the nature of this situation. But the point is, at least say they offer alternative points of view. At least say ask other people's opinions. Anyway, I want to break this down a little bit because this is something I've been seeing in the last few days. There's been a number of people pushing the conspiracy theory that this is all a staged situation. And the logic seems to be, why would Assad shoot himself in the foot? Well, I've been thinking a bit about this. Firstly, and I'll get this out of the way, if it does transpire that Assad wasn't behind this chemical attack, that it was those Islamists on the ground that were responsible for it, or someone else, then a lot of people are going to look foolish, myself included. And if that is proven beyond a doubt to have not been Assad and this was all one big setup and it was someone else, I will make a video acknowledging that. But here's the thing, in regards to Ron Paul, his worldview is non-intervention no matter what the situation. I honestly believe that Ron Paul's position on this is blinded by his ideological position on the subject of intervention. In other words, he's making Syria exactly the same as Iraq, which of course it isn't. In the case of Iraq, that was an invasion before any war had started. The invasion started the war. In the case of Syria, there's a war going on. So I think it's misguided to just make this casual comparison between the two. Um, a lot of people oppose the war in Iraq, but that doesn't mean every single intervention is wrong. And because Ron Paul is opposed to all interventions, I believe that is what his position is based on. It's not based on facts. It's not based on any solid information that he has. It's based entirely on his assumption. Um, Now, why would Assad do this? I don't buy this argument that Assad would be losing out by committing an atrocity like this. I don't think Assad cares. This is a guy whose regime has used torture, who has used barrel bombs, who has indiscriminately killed civilians because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, From the start of this war, it's been a policy of collective punishment. If you doubt me, look at the official Syrian government spokespeople. When they speak in English, it's always about terrorists. In other words, there is this collective punishment that the regime views every Syrian who opposes him as the same. That's the position the regime takes. In other words, as far as the regime is concerned, civilians who died in this chemical attack are exactly the same as al Nusra fighters or ISIS fighters. I don't think the regime differentiates. And why would they? That is not the nature of totalitarian regimes. I mean, did Hitler think rationally during the Battle of Berlin? This idea, oh, Assad isn't thinking rationally. I think, I mean, put it this way, he's survived now for 6 years. And he's a smart guy. He's a pathological liar. This is a guy who can lie his way out of any situation, and him and his spokespeople have been doing it from the start. So I think people are assuming that because Assad is smart and because he's well spoken in interviews, that he therefore thinks rationally. He's a dictator. He's one of the world's very worst dictators. Even without this war situation, Syria was one of the very worst abusers of human rights. It was way up there with Uzbekistan, China, Burma. Worse, actually, than many other places that have dubious human rights records. I mean, I just think people are going down the wrong line of assuming that Assad isn't capable of it. For one thing, the practical situation is that only Russia and the Syrian regime, um, in terms of those who are active combatants on the ground, excluding Turkey and the United States, because they are less involved directly militarily than either Russia or the Syrian government. I'm not saying they're not involved, of course they are, but the point is the Al Nusra Front and ISIS don't have planes. Now, as I understand it, the chemicals that were used could only be dropped in an aerial bombardment. So the argument the regime is making that they somehow activated when this building or buildings were hit, I just don't think that's really plausible. Does that mean I'm not saying that terrorists aren't capable of getting their hands on these sort of weapons. I mean, it has been done before in the Tokyo subway attack in 1995. Um, but in historical cases, most of the time when chemical warfare has been used, it's been used by a nation state, by a government force. I mean, look at Saddam Hussein with the Halabja attack. That's a good example. Look at World War One when mustard gas was used by standing armies, by nation states. So most of the history of warfare shows that it is governments and standing armies, not ragtag terrorists who are capable of doing this. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to. They're certainly sadistic enough to do it. So, I don't think anyone's questioning that ISIS or other groups would have any moral issues about doing this. It's simply about capability. And the point is, the Assad regime is winning this war, militarily speaking. Therefore, it makes sense that they are the side that is more likely to have the capabilities to do this. I just don't think it figures that, oh, well, the world might. I mean, the world's been criticizing the Assad regime for 6 years. Do you really think it's going to make a difference now? I really don't think he will care. And I think Ron Paul's and others who think like this are being incredibly short sighted to assume that Assad isn't capable of it. I mean, why is Ron Paul determined to make everything into a conspiracy theory? People are comparing this to the Gulf of Tonkin. Look, if it transpires that Assad wasn't responsible, I'm going to look foolish. And I don't pretend I know everything. But I think the assumption that it was Assad is more plausible than the assumption that it wasn't Assad, if I could put it that way. Okay, thanks for watching.